Jessi Patton. It's so perfect to welcome you to the Sharpen podcast because do you know why? It's National FFA Week.
It is, isn't it? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I feel like I'm so out of the loop.
It's okay. It's okay. It's President's Day that we're recording. And for a little bit of background, so I'm looking at Jessi now, and I was a younger FFA, just a few years younger than Jessi, but she was a state officer and basically the coolest person ever, and she still is. And so what's so neat, I'm sure you can identify with this too. I feel this way with you and Sheldon, and like all of a sudden these, they were state officers or national officers, and then like you get to know them in a friendship space or you work with them, and it's so cool, like you have to like keep your cool together, but you're like, all my dreams are coming true.
No, I feel the exact way about you. I mean, I just remember you walking into the room and it was like a glow, like, oh, Kirby's here.
Yeah, it was probably like sweat or something unglamorous if there was a glow. Well, first of all, welcome to the Sharpen podcast. I'm so glad to have you on and to get to hear from you today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for asking me.
This is so wonderful. And we were talking about a mutual friend of ours who, since the podcast came about, was like, there's one guest and one guest only. And now she's here with us. So, Jessi, get us started. Tell us, for those that are meeting you for the first time, tell us about who you are.
Well, I would say first and foremost, I am a Kentucky girl through and through, born and raised, small town. And I would include, I'm an attorney. And we were talking about this earlier, being an entrepreneur is part of who I am. So I would say an entrepreneur and a CEO. I'm also an aunt to a beautiful little boy named Wells Pritchard. And I guess I would say is, within the past week, I am what the kids are calling these days as like a digital nomad, which is kind of a fancy word of saying homeless by choice. So I'm dipping my toe into the travel world too.
Very cool. Okay, so talk about that. What do some of those days or weeks look like as a digital nomad?
Right now, it's me sitting in a kitchen, like surrounded and just trying to like fit my laptop into things. That's basically what it is like so far. Taking calls in the car, trying to work with time zones. I never knew when I became an adult that time zones would be such an issue for me.
Yes. There was a recent like online blog with Edge Mentoring, and they were asking me what I was learning as a mentor, and I put time zone management, and I was like, someone's going to laugh at this, but then there's going to be someone else that's like, oh,
Oh, yeah. I talked to someone from Australia last night because it was Monday her time, and we have gotten it wrong so many times. It's really hard to manage. I think it goes back to like my trouble with math too.
Well, I have a great Calendly. We'll have to talk about that because that's what's helped me with time zone management.
Yes,
like as far as
I love Calendly. Yeah.
Okay, that somewhat helps, but it still comes with challenges. So, well, you've kind of alluded to your digital nomad like status, but tell us about the work that you have done and that you're currently doing.
Yeah. So I am, I guess, I started my career as an attorney. I went to law school in DC. And quickly realized that I was going down a path that I didn't really connect with, in an industry that I didn't feel connected to, which was really scary. So I actually ended up starting my own law practice in Atlanta, Georgia, and focused on serving people who needed estate planning and business law services. And then in 2017, I started coaching other attorneys in a business called Jurisdiction. And my now business partner, Megan Wakefield, who is fantastic, she also went to law school with me. And we are basically just trying to change law, for attorneys and the practice of law and make it better for people.
Okay, so talk about that. I love hearing all the big things that you're always doing. It's like every 3 or 4 years, Jessi's doing something even cooler. But so what do you mean by change law?
Yeah, it's really just my own path to try to find my place, in the legal industry. We had talked about this a little bit earlier, but I had I was in law school. It was 3L year, and I just knew that the traditional path to success that, is considered successful for an attorney, which is work for a judge, get hired at a big firm, get on the partner track, was not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like such a fraud, like I had wasted, this huge investment, and I was,
Sure.
I felt really stuck. And it was really, I felt ashamed about it, because I thought that I needed to know exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life by the time I was 24 years old, like a lot of people.
Yes.
And, I think with the law practice and jurisdiction, it was just a natural path to kind of maybe do some healing for myself. And along the way, I found out that a lot of people feel the same way that I did, and so I realized, that I could still practice law if I made it my own and, put my own personality, put my own values, put my own interests into it and structured it around the way that I wanted to live and the way that I wanted to practice law instead of doing it the way that everybody else was doing it. And that's kind of how jurisdiction was born. And, we coach attorneys to build law practices that support their lifestyle, not the other way around. So, folk getting really clear on what you want in your life. And I think that it's such a gift. Hey.
Cora's making her way in.
Hey, and I think it's such a gift, to give someone space to think about that, and to think about what they really want in their life instead of just throwing a goal on the wall, like I want $1 million practice.
Yes.
You want $1 million practice. How is that going to support your life? And so at jurisdiction, we start there and get to the root, which takes a lot of work. And Megan, our chief wellness officer, really gets into that with folks. And then building, their ideal law practice around that vision.
Jessi, hang on one second. Let me, what do you need, baby? Open your jelly beans. Hey, I bet if you take those to bed, he will open this.
But he won't do it.
William said Mama asked if you would open your jelly. Okay, all right. Speaking of world crisis, we needed our jelly beans open, and we couldn't open them. So,
that one, yeah.
We'll have to edit my segment out there. Yeah. Jessi, I think what you're sharing not only resonates with an audience of young professionals because, well, you are one and you walk through what we constantly hear as feedback. So a couple things you said of like the pressure and the shame of like, well, I did this and so therefore I have to do this. But what you're doing in this conversation in terms of attorneys is of changing the trajectory of like, I'm still doing what I'm passionate about. The way that it's done looks a little bit different. So can you talk through, I just know that you get that. If there's a young professional out there that's listening, what's the advice, what's the coaching that you would share?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if somebody is listening, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that, feel like has this, maybe you haven't even said it out loud, that like, what have I done? That this is not what I thought it would be. And I feel stuck. First, know that it is okay. A lot of people feel like that and you are not stuck. And, that's why I like to bring in the art of the pivot.
Oh, good. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah. That's what I did with my law degree. And instead of thinking of it as one set trajectory based on the degree that I had, I started viewing my law degree as a platform instead of a career. Like if you've been to college or especially if you have a grad school degree or just life experience, you have so much transferable skills that can be put towards an industry to test out. And I think I got one of the best pieces of advice when I was in law school. It was 3L year. My professor's name was Dorcas Gilmore. It was in clinic. And I was telling her about this. Like, I have a secret that I just need to tell you that, like, I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. And I still get emotional, like, saying that out loud. And she was like, Jessi, she's like, you have to realize that this industry was not built with you in mind. You know, especially if you are a woman or, you know, if you're a person of color, you are not in the calculation of how this industry was structured. And I would even just say, you know, men today, men want different things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
They want space, you know, for their family. They want balance, and knowing that, you know, knowing that this industry, and that is not just for law, it's agriculture, it's corporate, it's accounting, you name it. Knowing that it wasn't built for you in mind, it gives you the permission to say, like, I don't have to conform to the status quo because it was never created for me in the first place. So how do you instead use it, you know, to have a great life on your terms? And, you know, removing the pressure, like, it doesn't matter. And, you know, I luckily found a way to practice law that I enjoy. Will I always practice law? Maybe not. But I know that even if I don't do that, I have been given this gift, you know, this platform and this experience that I can use in a lot of industries.
That's so good. Thanks for sharing too about that conversation with that professor, because I can imagine a lot of our listeners have had that conversation. If they have not, they probably will, right? If we're being honest, like, I just don't know if I want to do this anymore, or I just don't know if I want to do this. It could be, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, like, even if it doesn't fit like your current phase of life, you know, why are we expected to have one career path and one way of working? You know, how is that supposed to fit us through every single phase of our life? That doesn't even make sense, you know, like that, especially for women and fathers, you know, that want to have kids and, you know, want to retire, have a maternity, paternity leave, you know. I think it's a conversation.
I think it's so easy to, like, think of the typical show with attorneys, Suits, you name it, right? You see this lifestyle, and although, like, super cool on TV screen, right? But for the person living, I love that you've challenged that and said, like, this doesn't have to be it or the way. It actually wasn't designed for folks that are like yourself, that have challenged that a bit. So tell us about that, what that looked like for you, and how you talked about the art of the pivot. So walk us through that, because if some of our listeners haven't gone through that, they might be in the future.
Yeah. So a little bit after law school, when I was starting my own practice, I wrote this article. I think it was called "Why You Should or Should Not Be or Have Your Own Law Practice," and I included a quote by Seth Godin that says, "If you are willing to do something that might not work, you are closer to being an artist." And basically, you know, what he was saying is that art doesn't require a paintbrush. It's, you know, an artist is something that uses bravery, insight, experience, creativity, boldness to challenge the status quo. And basically, in my own path, you know, I knew that law, even in estate planning, which, but for folks that don't know, it's like wills and trusts, and basically you're talking about death all the time and horrible situations of parents, you know, having to name guardians for their children. It's a pretty intense conversation.
Yeah.
And the way that it currently was, you know, in the firms that I had seen, it was so transactional. It was, you know, it was just about the documents and not about the people that I was having conversations with. And that changed real quick. You know, I made that one-on-one interaction and that relationship the number one priority, you know, of our practice. And we expanded that. You know, we went beyond the documents. We included, you know, a legacy interview where we got to interview, you know, parents or business owners and talk about their life stories, where they're from, who they are, their values, and have their voice recorded. Which, you know, if you think about it, that would be the most valuable thing to your children, or if your parents had done that. You know, we need to be thinking about the people that we're serving and not just the documents. And so that was a way that I changed up things a bit. And, you know, in jurisdiction, I think the biggest thing that we are doing there is just caring for attorneys. And, you know, I think in a lot of different industries, sacrifice is a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what you need to do to get that partner track. And I used to do this. I used to brag about how much I worked.
Oh yeah.
I love telling people how much.
And how little I slept because I worked so hard.
You know, I remember telling things like, "Oh yeah, I worked about 9,500 hours this week," you know, and just like looking back on that, like, what were you thinking? You know, you were so unhealthy. You weren't sleeping. You had no social life. And I had been taught to be really proud of that. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. I was listening to you talk about some of the ways that you tied in, and it certainly was creativity, but I would also say it was empathy, compassion, like just really humanizing what you were doing, and left this like kind of lasting legacy piece to the conversation that just wasn't, it was transactional, and then you made it transformational through art, through creativity. And for folks that are listening today, I mean, I think that so often, I know you and I had chatted a little bit about this before we got started, but you know, I work in the agriculture industry. Typically most meetings aren't, well, how can we use like creativity and some form of art to really change up X, Y, and Z. But when embraced, can be such a game changer. But there has to be this boldness, because I don't know about you, at first whenever I would like propose something that felt a little bit more on the creative side, or incorporating like some form of art in the way you defined it, it felt like I felt those shame triggers, like, what are you doing? This is not your job to do this. Everybody's going to think it's weird. So can we just stop there for a moment? And so if someone's in kind of a non-creative space, but they have a lot of creative ideas and energies, I mean, how do you step into that? Because I think it creates game changer moments for a business, for an organization, but you got to like jump over some hurdles at first or start. I mean, I did.
Yeah, it is not easy. And I mean, frankly, it's terrifying, you know?
Oh, yes.
And I agree. Like it depends on your environment. And even if you do work for a company or a business that is open to ideas, and I think most are, you know, we see the big corporate companies that are about 50 years behind when it comes to women and people of color. But I think a lot of people and a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses want to move, and they need people like that. And I think another thing to keep in mind, you know, not only do you have that responsibility to yourself to speak up, to make that job or that career serve you better as an employee to that company, because I think you have to know your own self, your own worth. You know, like, I am important to this company, and my voice matters, but also you have a responsibility, I think, to the people that you work with, to give them, to show them, like, and to give them an opening to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's, once that person, you know, takes that first step, you've created a floor, you know, for other people to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. So I love, you've got your hand in like a lot, not just your hand, but you've got your energies in a lot of different ways. You talked about, actually go back to, you said, we help attorneys. Can you say that again? I loved what.
Well, I don't know what I said.
You were talking about, it was about, we help them lifestyle and work, and then not the other way around. I forget how you phrased it, but it was done really well.
Yeah. So if you're in the legal industry, you know that there is a very defined way of running a law practice.
Yeah.
And we kind of threw that out the door and said, like, let's start with you. You know, like, let's talk about what you really want, and then define the law practice around your ideal lifestyle instead of designing your life around a law practice, because it can be done. And I think that has been a gift to our clients, you know, to this sigh of relief, you know, like, oh, I can do it this way, you know, and I can build a business that isn't structured the same way law practices have been structured for 50 years.
Yeah.
I can change it and it can still be successful.
You could probably take the word attorney and sub out a lot of the roles that our audience has. I was just having a conversation the other day with a teacher, and the amount of work that teachers, principals, whatever their title is, assistants, because you have your work day, you have your students that you deeply love, and then you have a basketball game that you're in charge of working, or a club that you sponsor, or just and so sub in teachers, sub in salespeople, sub in any category, entrepreneur, nonprofit, executive manager. And I know that this is a series. It's not a formula, right? Yeah, jurisdiction, you all don't have the secret formula that you walk through, but what are those maybe 1, 2, 3 key questions that, because I heard you say earlier, someone will say, my goal is to be, make X dollars. Well, why? But what are some of those key questions that you would encourage our audience today, especially as you think about something that has a very set trajectory, or it looks like it does? What are those key questions to ask yourself so that you stay in check?
Right. I would say my best piece of advice is not kind of throw that out the window for 5 minutes. You know, if you sat down and you wrote what your day-to-day life looked like 3 years from now, and I want you to get specific. You know, what time do you wake up in the morning? Do you cook your kids breakfast? You know, what type of clothes are you wearing, and how does that make you feel? The feelings are really, really important. And I know this is like kind of woo-woo, but it really gets to the heart of it. And, you know, like, what do you want your work day to look like? I think it's okay to include income in that, but just make sure that there's something behind it. You know, I think you got to remove the ego from it. So, and I was guilty of this when I started my own practice. I threw that out on a wall that I wanted to make $1 million law practice because I thought that was what success meant.
Yeah.
But I had no idea why I wanted to do that. And I certainly didn't need to make that much in order to live the lifestyle that I wanted. In fact, running $1 million law practice looks really different from the law practice that I actually wanted to run. So, you know, taking the time to get specific into what that looks like and doing the numbers, and, you know, how much, you know, once you have that 3-year lifestyle written down, you know, go through and itemize, like, what do I have to bring in the door, or what kind of income do I have to make to maintain that type of lifestyle? Because, you know, like, we don't like to talk about money and income all the time, but it's pretty important, you know, and I think it can be worked into, you don't have to sacrifice your lifestyle for your income, but it needs to be included in the conversation as well.
Yeah.
I would say that that's what we have all of our clients do, is to do that 3-year dream life picture, and then go through a process of getting into the details of what will it take to get there.
Oh yeah. I think that's such a helpful place to start. And you may be in a role or a career, or you're like, I absolutely love this. You know, like I'm not questioning at all. I don't say I wasn't born for this. I might be saying I was born for this, but it still is a healthy practice to go through that 3-year process.
And I would say that that's the case for a lot of folks. You know, I know that I've struggled with my career. Thankfully, more than other people have. I'm grateful that that maybe not as many people have struggled with their career like I have. Yeah.
Well, you are a successful entrepreneur, attorney, coach, fill in all the things that you do. And so to hear someone like yourself say, I've struggled with these things, or I had these moments if I really question things, I think is also another piece here for today, is that you're willing to say it out loud and build your right council of people around you to help you kind of walk through that too. Because what's a sad day is that someone continues to proceed in something that they're miserable doing and they never once voice it, because you and I know that's what contributes to a terrible culture in a workplace. So I just appreciate that you have shared that with us numerous times today. So what you're doing now is so I had not heard of digital nomad, and now, as you can tell, I'm really like fixated on that term. I'll probably use it like 14 times a week now.
Yeah.
But tell us what it's like. So you're running multiple businesses, and you're, like you said, I'm trying just to fit my laptop and get Wi-Fi in different places. What are you learning as a young professional now, as far as owning and managing businesses, as well as all the other things that you're doing?
Yeah. So a year ago, not a year ago, I would say, yeah, about December 2017, I didn't like that I was being, and I don't have kids, I'm not married. So I have a level of freedom, and anyways, and I wanted to create a business of where I didn't need to be tied to a specific office because I wanted to travel. Mm-hmm. And so and I wrote it down. I wrote down what I wanted my dream day to look like. And lo and behold, it has come true. And, so I'm starting in Florida, and I'm going to go to Kentucky for a little bit. But then I'm going to Italy and Croatia and Slovenia and Greece. And I'm going to be working the entire time. So we'll see how that goes. But it's been good so far. I think it's been, don't get me wrong, it has its own challenges, and sometimes it's not as luxurious as it sounds, but I do think that the beneficial part of it is this is what works for me in my life, right now. And I work in an industry of where that type of mobility is not common, and I would even say like considered impossible,
Yeah.
But going back to like getting creative, and I make it work because it's important to me. And this is my version of freedom. I think that's very, very, very personal to me and my situation. I think like if you're a parent, your version of freedom, may be going to the office 2 days a week and working from home 3 days a week and having long weekends with your family. I don't want to get hung up on the travel lifestyle, because I think there's a lot of different versions, and it's so personal to like each individual.
Oh yeah, that's a great. Well, and I was reading a book here recently where the author was talking about the freedom in the workplace, and how some companies will come out with policy that's like no emails on the weekends or after like 10 p.m. and it's like, actually, in thinking that you're cultivating freedom, you actually just pulled it away from someone that like operates their best at 10 p.m. So it is defined differently. And so to have individually or organizationally a mindset that like constantly challenges that definition is a really healthy place to be as far as engaging your entire workforce. But I love that you mentioned that. What would you say is maybe the biggest challenge on a daily basis that you face as a kind of young professional business owner and entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm. I would say I always feel like I'm not doing enough,
Yeah.
Enough hours in the day. And I'm still trying to find a balance.
Okay.
And trying to take time outside of the office, because one of the things about being an entrepreneur, I think you have a much harder time of setting those work hours because, and not only that, you know, my office is where my laptop is. So I don't have, you know, the restrictions of going into the office or not. So that's honestly like what I'm struggling with. When to stop working, take a break, you know, make yourself some dinner and
Yeah.
fun, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jessi, this has just been so good. I love catching up on the work you're doing and that just the life that you're living. There's just so many nuggets that I hear from creativity and fostering creativity. I think another message too, actually, I want to ask you this. So we have a lot of managers of young professionals that have started listening to the podcast as well as college students. So our audience is young professionals, like those in that first 10 years of a career or in the marketplace, or fill in the blank of whatever the work that you're doing. For managers of young professional, in light of everything that you shared today, what are those bits of encouragement? Because I think there's a lot that you could share just based off of your experiences so far.
Yeah. I think, you know, my advice to the managers is to create a platform, you know, for listening to the young adults that you're working with. You know, help them know their value, because I think when you're just entering the workforce, it's so intimidating. And
Oh, for sure.
anything right, and you know, you've been branded with millennial, and you know, and it's nice to know, like, when your superior, one, appreciates you and the work, but is also listening and knows that you are the future of that, you know, that corporation or that business or nonprofit or you know, government organization. And just give and ask, you know, like ask for input and know that their voice is heard. I think that's so important.
Yeah, for sure. Especially like go back to that creativity conversation piece. If you're seeking out someone, and I think that all comes down to too of like really understanding the gifts and the talents of your people. And
Yeah.
that's for young professionals or seasoned veterans, right? Of like understanding individual gifts and talents and then how to really like maximize those.
And
But
taking time to, you know,
sure.
to learn about your employees, taking them out to coffee to learn about those gifts. I think we get so bogged down in the day to day. It's easy, you know, to forget to set time aside to not only focus on your clients and your customers, but also your employees, because as clients and customers, the most, maybe even before your clients and customers, is your employees and your workforce.
Yeah, that's spot on. That's spot on. This has been so good. I think that you are doing so many fascinating things. It's making a real impact on many people's lives, and I just appreciate that you're willing to challenge the status quo and to say, I don't have it maybe all figured out, and we're figuring out as we go, but here's the real impact that we're making.
Yeah, I think that's
well. Yeah. Well, we ask 2 questions on every episode, Jessi, of our guests. The first one is to make a shout out. So who is someone or group of people that you want to publicly make a shout out of appreciation?
I would say mine's a little, maybe a little unexpected. I'm going to give a shout out to Wells Pritchard, my 2-year-old nephew, who has taught me that it is always okay to take a break, to play and enjoy life a little bit.
Oh, and I've seen pictures of him and he is beautiful. I know you use that word.
Yeah, he's precious. The most thoughtful 2-year. I know I'm biased, but I think he's just the most thoughtful little person in the world.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yep. Little kiddos can remind us of the fundamentals. That's for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another question we always ask our guests that come on is a game changer, which I love. You shared so many shout outs and so many game changers throughout your story here, and it could be a really complex scenario to just a really cool food item. But what's something that's been a game changer for you here lately?
Yeah, that's the one that I kind of got stuck on. The thing that I kept going back to that I think was a huge game changer in my life was I turned down a job right out of law school, and it was a secure job, and you know, it was a great job. And I said, you know what, I'm going to actually trust my gut on this one and know that this path is not for me. And so I was terrified.
Oh, for sure.
To do that. And I did it anyways. And I think it was one of the best decisions that I ever made. So trust your gut, even when, you know, some people don't agree with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, appreciate everything that you have shared with us today. Which, by the way, we're still recording, but we're not, or however you want to view it. But that, I do. I mean it. I so appreciate you being willing to say, like, I had these oh crap moments, or these like super moments of, I don't want to do it this way, because I think that everyone's had that thought, but fewer are okay with vocalizing it, you know?
Yeah, I hope it wasn't too negative.
No, it was not negative at all.
I hope I was a little positive to people some hope.
I didn't. I think it was certainly positive. I think you gave our audience permission to ask questions, if anything, of what's going on. Because this is probably a conversation that routinely comes up in the feedback of how do you know? And it's a valuable question, and maybe we're still recording, so what the heck, I guess. But how do you know when you are growing and working through the grind? Like, I don't really love this, but I know I'm growing from it. And then how do you know when you're grinding away with like no end in sight, feels very purposeless? Like, how do you distinguish the two and know when to make a transition? Because our audience really seems to understand, like, there's going to be moments I'm just not going to love this part of my job, and that's okay. But when do I eventually say, okay, that's enough. Like, I've done this thing for way too long.
Yeah, I think that's tough, you know, because I think you have to, it's so personal, because you have to consider like what responsibilities like that you have in your life. And I know that I want to be upfront and open that I don't have a lot of the responsibilities that a lot of people have. You know, I don't have a spouse, and I don't have children. And so I have a level of freedom, you know, that I can just start a business, you know, and I want to address that, because I think that I think it is a valid reason, but it can also be used as an excuse, and, you know, to not make the move that you want to make. And I think for me personally, there's some days that I don't know if I want to be an entrepreneur, but it's fleeting, and, you know, like, it's hard. And, you know, I always come back to like, come on, Jessi, you know, you're meant to do this. Like, you know, you may not be with jurisdiction forever, you know, not being an attorney, but you know yourself well enough to know that you really love autonomy and, you know, those foundational pieces that go with the line of work that I'm in. And I think it's also important to note that these changes, or if you do realize, like, and you know in your gut that you do not want to do this forever, it doesn't have to be one huge leap one day, you know, like, give yourself time to, you know, to either build that arsenal if you need it in savings, you know, start going to lunch with people in different industries. Literally, like, if you're one of those people who are actually not even sure what they want to do, that's okay. Start setting up coffees on your lunch break, or do a virtual coffee and just learn about people's careers. I've heard that so many times from so many successful people of, how did you begin? And it was never like, well, I just decided I was going to leave my job today. It was never that. You know, they knew, like, I needed to know what else was out there. So I literally got on LinkedIn and looked up any profession that, excuse me, that I was interested in. And I set up a coffee date or a Zoom, and people were thrilled to tell me about their careers, because, you know, we don't do that enough. And I think it's so, you know, it's like doing this. It's so much fun. So it doesn't have to be a huge leap.
Yeah. Well, and I think it certainly comes with like risk, but they're calculated and they're planned. And like you said, you don't just one day walk in and say, I'm out of here and I have no plans and I've made no efforts.
Yeah, maybe you do, but you don't have to put that amount of pressure on yourself.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Not everything has to be from a movie screen, like kind of look. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. Hey, thank you.